Excellennial here with another story-based Excel tutorial. Today, I'm telling you about Katie the knitter. Katie recently realized that she accidentally made two separate contact sheets for her best online knitting stores. One had all of the contact information, like phone numbers and emails, but the other sheet had all of the yarn per yard pricing. Katie would much rather have one workbook with all of these pieces of information put together. She doesn't want to spend hours going through this process of combining everything though. Let's see if we can help by using a VLOOKUP function. Here's an example of the spreadsheet that has all of the contact information on it, and here's an example of the spreadsheet that has all of the pricing information on it. Now these are the two spreadsheets that Katie wants to put together, but wants to be sure that she's adding the correct pricing per yard to the correct website. This is the example of what we want the entire spreadsheet to look like when we're done. Company name, website, contact name, email, phone, and then all of the prices per yard based on the yarn type. So how are we going to use an Excel function to move the data from the pricing info sheet over to the contact info sheet with confidence that the right pricing is matching the correct company? We're going to use a VLOOKUP. Before I do anything with the function though, I'm going to verify that we have one matching column in each of the spreadsheets. Here you can see that we have in column B the website name, and we also have the website column A in the pricing info sheet. So we know that there's one thing that is identical on both sheets, or if she did have them separate workbooks, on both workbooks, and that's going to be our reference point. Now I'm going to copy this header, and now we have the columns ready to go for what we need to fill in. So how exactly do we tell it what to look for and what data it needs to pull back into the columns? Let me show you a breakdown of what VLOOKUP asks for when you program it, and then we'll walk through the steps. So first, we need to tell it the lookup value, or the reference point. What is it looking up to match to the other tab in the first place? We're looking up the website name, because that's the one thing that we know matches the pricing info tab. So we're going to select the cell B2 for the website. We're not going to select the entire column. We want to be sure we're very specific that we want the formula to find this exact website on the pricing info sheet. Now we'll press comma so it stops working on the lookup value and it starts working on the table array. Now the table array is going to be where you will find your lookup value in the next sheet. So where are we going to find the website on pricing info? Somewhere in this column A. Now, the other thing that we have to make sure of is that we also select what we want our return value to be. So the website is our reference. That's what we're looking up, and that's going to be what matches the data to the contact info tab, but we need to tell it what we want it to return to us. So I'm going to select A through B. We want it to return the price per yard of wool, which will be column B. Now I'll press comma again to close that all out. We're done telling it where it needs to look for the reference point and what data it needs to return to us. Now we have the column index number. This is where we say what number matches the column that we want the return data to show. So what I mean by that is we selected column A and column B, and we want the data returned to the column that we're working in, or the cell that we're programming the function into. We want the returned data to be from column B. We're going to add the number 2 because the column B is the second column that we selected. Add a comma to close that out. Now the range lookup is important. It's optional, but it's important. We want to be sure that we type in false here, and the reason being, it's going to require that whatever data it looks up in column A of the pricing info, it needs to match what we have in cell B2 on the contact info tab exactly. So it's going to look specifically for wardinc.com in the pricing info sheet under column A. Now when I press enter, it's going to bring me back the pricing that we had on the pricing info sheet. In the VLOOKUP, B2 is our reference point. This is what we're looking for from this sheet, B2, which is wardinc.com. Then next is pricing info AB, which is on the pricing info tab. We are looking for the website information and the return value in column A and column B. The number 2 is saying that we want our return value to be what is in the second column that we selected. Then false is saying that it must match exactly. If we type in true, it will be approximate matches. Just to show you that real quick, I want to go back onto here and see This website here does say that the price per yard of wool is $9.99, and that's because we have the lookup value set to false, meaning that it needs to return the exact pricing value to the cell F2. But if I change this to true, it's only going to match the 9. Now it's 921. So it's partially matching, and that's not what we want. So we want to be careful that we don't forget to add the false in there, because if we just remove true altogether, it gives us the same result. When you don't add that false in there, it doesn't calculate your exact matches because it doesn't have that reference point to tell you it needs to be an exact match. Now, because we already have this programmed, we can go ahead and double click that little square in the corner and it will automatically update each of these cells to change to B7, B8, B9. So what that's doing is, let's take cell F10. It says that this VLOOKUP must look in cell B10 to find the website that we are looking for, match that website in cell B10 to any website in the pricing info sheet. Then when it finds that matching website to cell B10, it needs to return the value that matches that same row from the second column that we selected, and it is false because it has to be an exact match. So that's how the actual function is written out and how it automatically updates when you double click that little square in the bottom. Right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. VLOOKUP, again, we're still just looking for the website, comma. This time we're actually going to select column A, B, and C. We don't actually need any of the information from column B, but it's going to ignore that because of how we tell it to look in the third column that we selected. So we already have those selected. We're going to pull the return information from the third column that we selected, comma, false, and enter. So it is now 2482, which does match that first row. We'll double click the little square and bring it all the way down. All right, so those are all updated. I want to be sure that we keep the data here, so I'm going to copy and then paste special and paste with values. Now when I click into these cells, it will actually be the data that we programmed, not the formula anymore. So let's try that VLOOKUP function with a little change this time in the column H and column I. So I'll go to the pricing info and I'm going to make a few changes. Now we already have the pricing info for the yards of wool and yards of cashmere, so we don't actually need those anymore. I am going to move this first column over to column C. Now I can show you how that index column number works a little bit more. It doesn't have to count all of the columns that are on your spreadsheet. It only counts the columns that you are actually selecting in that first section. So let me explain that a little bit more by walking through the VLOOKUP. Now in cell H2 equal VLOOKUP, we're still looking for the website as our reference point, comma. Now this time the table array is actually going to be C through D. Comma to close that out. Now D is actually the fourth column, but we're still going to use the number 2 as our column index number. The reason being is that we selected column C and column D, and in the VLOOKUP function, that's considered column 1 and column 2. It doesn't matter that we have 2 more columns before that. The table array says that there's only these 2 columns, and the column index number says we need to look at the second column for the return value, or the price per yard for cotton yarn. Now we'll add the comma, and again, false to make sure that it's the exact match, not an approximate match, and we'll double click that down. Now I'm going to show you one more thing in terms of how we can use that column index number. With the price per yard of acrylic, again, VLOOKUP will still select B2 here because that's our reference point. And then in pricing info, instead we're actually going to select C through E. This time, because we actually need the return value to be the info from column E, we're going to tell it to look at column 3, the third column that we selected, which in this case is actually the column E, or the 5th column, but it's only the 3rd column that we selected on our table array. Now that's still not accurate information because I need to add the false here. Now I'll double click that drop down. And these 2 columns are still programmed with a formula, so I'm going to copy and paste those. This is another way to paste with values. If you use copy and paste from your keyboard, you could select the drop down here and select values only. And now we have an exact copy of the finished spreadsheet with all of our information moved over, and it didn't take us forever. It only took us one function in 4 different columns and making sure that we were referencing the right data and that it was the exact match by using the false piece in that formula. With all of that said, Katie is very happy with her results, and it didn't take her forever filtering through each of the knitting store website names and slowly adding all the data back in. If you have any questions about this process, leave a comment in the section below, and until next time, have fun excelling!